The country's third largest wine supplier wants out of the category, while the amount of tariff talk makes companies seek stability among shifting political priorities and the threat of rising costs. All that and a recap of how you can proactively think about the news you heard from the annual Expo West convention. I'm Sightline's Director of Insights, Brian Roth, joined by lead analyst Kate Bernat for this episode of The Gist. And Kate, we're going to talk about one of the biggest stories in the world of alcohol this month, and that is the reported divestiture of Constellation Brands of what remains of their wine portfolio. Let's set the stage for that news real quick, and then we'll take a step back to talk about what's happening with the wine category and how this fits in. So, Kate, when you think about this news, Constellation reportedly selling off the remaining number of brands, what's going on, and then we'll get to the why.
Sure. So Constellation will reportedly divest of lower end brands as well as premium labels, likely to two different buyers, lower end brands to Delicato family wines, premium labels to Duckhorn. These are some, Constellation owns some real grocery store stalwarts here: Woodbridge, Robert Mondavi, Schrader Cellars, as well as Kim Crawford, Sea Smoke, some other sort of smaller brands. Anyhow, reportedly getting out of the wine biz entirely to focus on beer and a little bit of spirits, but really to focus on the Mexican imported brands that are just on fire in beer right now. And wine has been a core piece of Constellation's portfolio for quite a while, declining in importance, or at least in dollar sales as a portion of that portfolio over the years, but still kind of a huge move to see the country's third largest wine supplier just decide to get out of that game entirely.
If you're with us on YouTube, you'll see a chart, estimates of the share of beer, wine, and spirits from Constellation's portfolio over the last 10 years based on their investment relations reports. In 2014, beer is estimated to be about 53% of their share of this portfolio. It's now around 76%. Wine, most importantly, declined from 42% in 2014 to 19% in 2024. This also, of course, obviously goes over the time span where Modelo Especial and Corona just became far more important for Constellation. And what this has done by getting out of the wine sector, or at least trying to do so, is it does match with what's more broadly going on with wine. So it has taken on lesser importance for Constellation, just as it has taken on less importance for Americans at large. We've had multiple years of declines in consumption. Last year for off-premise sales was estimated to be about a decline of 8%, again, compounded on previous years of declines too. Wine as a whole annually is about 14 to 16% right now of Americans' share of liquor, beer, or wine. So it's not a high amount of what people are drinking. It's not a high amount of what's selling. And Kate, I guess what this points to with Constellation as well is simply that, when you have something that's working like Modelo in your Mexican imports, it's just kind of cutting bait, it seems, on a space that it's not clear what Americans' investments should be in, and when you're responsible to shareholders, whether they should be looking at this as well.
Yes, given the climate for wine that you've described here, to have brands succeed requires a lot of attention, a lot of investment, a lot of focus on brands themselves versus just wine broadly, right? And so at a time when you have your core products of Mexican beers just absolutely on fire, attracting attention of investors like Warren Buffett, who poured a cool $1 billion into Constellation recently. Obviously you have this just shining star, and then you have this portion of your portfolio that's going to require kind of really specialized attention and massaging and brand building and trying to buck the category narrative. It's just a lot of work. And wouldn't it be easier to focus all of your company's, human and fiscal resources essentially doubling down on the thing that seems kind of unstoppable right now.
Yeah, and I think there is a natural reaction to this of this is the sky falling now because such a powerful force in the world of American wine is saying, no thanks. As we've reported on Sightlines, there are areas of growth within wine. There are young people who feel attached and curious and interested in wine. But the big picture scope of a company like Constellation that clearly has a winner and is devoting far more resources to its beer side of thing. The context I think is most important is that this doesn't necessarily speak to some overly dramatic shift in wine. It just maybe reinforces the number storyline that we see, that wine is just not a high priority for many Americans. And so the wins have to come in more targeted, like you were talking about, brand building ways that a large national company like Constellation maybe just doesn't want to splurge on.
100%. It's not really a question of is wine doomed broadly. Is Constellation the best company to steward some of these brands, maybe, hopefully back towards growth. And I think, they're saying no, perhaps a smaller portfolio like Duckhorn or something would be better poised to give these specific brands kind of like the storytelling and the attention that they would need to connect with consumers in a way that's actually relevant and successful. And Constellation is just saying, look, we have other priorities. We're not the ones to do this. It doesn't mean that these these brands don't have a future or can't connect with consumers. I think it's a question of who is the best, again, steward of those brands. And Constellation says, not us. We're gonna concentrate on our fighting spirit over here in Mexican beer.
It is important to remember too the way that shareholders play into this, because the story of Mexican imports, which represent a little over 80% of all imports brought into the US, has been such a huge story for the last few years. And Pacifico and Modelo Especial for Constellation in particular have just been huge in their growth. And shifting some of the focus, if and when they do, from wine over to beer and then spirits, the small amount that they do pay attention to spirits are in roughly two of the only categories that are have really strong growth and interest right now. That's tequila. They have 2 tequila brands as well as a couple of high-end bourbons. So there is a little bit more elasticity to what those can do. They're a bit more resistant proof to some of the broader trends we see in alcohol as well. So then what we have is Constellation Brands with a killer beer portfolio with some of the most popular and fastest growing brands in the country, alongside a niche segment of spirits that fills in that premium space that Constellation has always tried to have.
Although, in light of current tariffs, this leaves Constellation with 2 very powerful but potentially vulnerable fighters. As you mentioned, a spirits portfolio led by tequila and a beer portfolio made entirely of Mexican imports.
Let's talk
No.
about that. Let's talk about that. Again, if you are with us on YouTube, you will see a graph that charts the Constellation brand stock price. We have a clear demarcation on January 10th, 2025. This is because it was a day before Trump officially obviously came into office in inauguration. However, this is where tariff talk really started to take off, as well as what it would look like from international counterparts. Kate, it seems like on a daily basis, nay, an hourly basis, there is something to discuss around what could or would happen with tariffs. Let's again set the stage for people, because even as they listen to this episode of The Gist, things will have certainly changed. But I think, again, the broad picture and what we're trying to describe for Sightline subscribers helps to give some context and some grounding into what's going on and how you can proactively think about this.
Right. I mean, tariffs, they're on again, they're off again, they're off for certain things. 200% tariffs on champagne, sure. These are clearly kind of snap decisions happening in the moment, and clearly also able to be walked back. And so I think rather than us talking about, the individual latest round of whatever's been proposed today in mid-March, I think, pulling back a little, the real overarching story here is the uncertainty that this creates in markets, obviously, as you just showed. And there's plenty of reporting on, what corporate executives are, are thinking about the uncertainty, whether that's in beverage alcohol or airlines or, hospitality, et cetera. Retail for sure. Big retailers feeling very nervous about the coming quarters. But this is trickling down to consumers too, right? Everyone says the stock market is not the economy. It's not. However, this kind of volatility and political uncertainty together, I think has consumers just really freaked out. Technical economic term there.
Yeah, the way that the American public more broadly, because of how present conversations around now tariffs, but also the stock market is just part of pop culture and is an easy, repeatable news item, using what the tariffs are doing to companies as a barometer for how people should feel about their spending patterns or what could be happening more broadly to them or their retirement portfolio. The problem here is that people don't know what to do or even how to feel about it as well. And for a space, if we were talking about alcohol or THC, energy, whatever feels like a value add item, a discretionary item to the day, then all of a sudden this instability in the way that you're feeling about the economy and your own finances, this whiplash can make these small decisions, even if there's that little treat for me today feeling, it can make them feel a little bit more challenging just because you're constantly reminded of what's going on and the threat of what could happen next.
Yeah. And, alcohol purchases, the vast majority happen in off-premise, grocery channels here in the US, grocery and liquor channels. However, as we look at broader, hits on retail, perhaps there's good data right now to indicate that people are pulling back on travel plans, which I think that's a massive indicator for the hospitality industry broadly of sort of where consumers are at. We see data to show that people are planning, fewer airline trips. Airline stocks are down massively. And again, like this may seem very far removed from tariffs on aluminum or something like that, but I think not to blur the lines too much, but I think it is all part and parcel of just a feeling of uncertainty. And when you are uncertain, you revert back, right? You play the safe bet. You don't gamble on big trips. You don't plan for gigantic purchases. You do the wait and see. There's also, indication that some large companies, specifically within beverage alcohol, have maybe stockpiled some raw materials and things, even liquid in the US ahead of, trying to get ahead of these tariffs. It's the same thing. It's a defensive posture that has reverberations 3, 4, 5 months from now.
Yeah, as we so often do with sightlines centering these kinds of things around consumers specifically, it is easy to get lost in the repetitive news of percentages of tariffs and what's going to happen to whom. But to kind of flip that camera around and think about, okay, so what does this do to a daily emotional state for consumers and how they're thinking about their spending too? We have shared regularly on sightlines that people are willing to spend and splurge, and it's about finding that right thing for that right moment and just feeling good and that you're not wasting your money. And this just throws just a little bit of a curveball. It's just a little bit of a twist on that, where the barrage of information around what this might do to your retirement account or just what it does to the world at large. So I'm not so much worried about the COGS increase again from the consumer perspective, but thinking about what this kind of whiplash does just to the daily spending options and the way that people are thinking about the budget.
I think I'll be curious to see, if we do see this drop in both leisure and corporate airline travel in particular, what this might do to consumer spending, because we're always going to look for that escape, right? And if it doesn't come through travel, where do we search then for escape and relaxation? And I wonder, will that shift towards more kind of like staycationing? Are people just going to look for experiences closer to home that feel quote unquote exotic, yet don't require travel? It makes me wonder what fills the gap that travel and escape usually fills for people.
A tease to future content on Sightlines. If you're not already a subscriber, we will have something on this topic exactly. As a matter of fact, a little tease for that. If you go back to Great Recession, or even coming out of the earlier days of COVID, things like chocolate shoot up in purchases. People trying to find these brief moments of pleasure and indulgence. It even immediately after COVID, one of the things that was noticed was young people's interest in attending music festivals for that interpersonal connection that just did not exist. So that idea of, well, I'm not traveling, but there is still plenty that both on-premise and off-premise brands can do to consider what this means as people are kind of reevaluating when and where they travel. If they don't, there's lots to be done at home.
Although with cocoa prices so high now, I think it's going to be ice cream. I don't know. We're chocolate in this economy, Brian.
Mint's ready to make its comeback, Kate. Speaking of a variety of flavors, let's talk real quick about some of the potential macro takeaways that we've been thinking about and other people can think about coming out of Expo West. This is an annual event out in California, in the Los Angeles area, where it's just the variety of typically new and innovative products, a lot that are focused on health and wellness explicitly. And so, the idea that there's going to be products like, if you're with us on YouTube, a Clear Protein, which is a protein enriched drink, 20 grams of protein, I believe, that this is going to become available to see and then later buy at Expo West. This is a common thing. But for us, Kate, I want to think about, again, the way that we're going to be talking about this kind of thing for Sightline subscribers, the way that new products are coming through, maybe aren't necessarily this year and in the near future focusing on some kind of brand new occasion or format, but instead are trying to own some small share of a space in a new way. So you're not just drinking a seltzer, you're drinking a 20 gram of protein seltzer.
Yes. In my scan of award-winning products from Expo West, there are awards within various categories there, and also just general coverage coming out of Expo West. This is very wide generalization, but as you said, I didn't see products that were entirely new to world. It was a lot of products that were in existing categories, but value add, right? Like you said, protein, water, chips with, who knows, creatine or something, waters with collagen. So not brand new category or occasions, but just what you already know with a functional ingredient or some kind of value add. Seemed to be the big trend this year. Global flavors continue to always dominate. Which flavors that might have seemed quote unquote exotic a few years ago are now sort of reaching that mainstream Whole Food shopper. That's always interesting to see, but nothing that I wasn't seeing a whole lot of products that I felt, wow, I've never seen this type of item before.
Yeah. Like there has been in years past, innovative products that create new behaviors or opportunities that just seem to be collectively maybe lost or not easily found this time around. So, the idea that there's going to be something new that's going to change the game in a truly disruptive way this year was more built around, here's something with more protein or magnesium or whatever it may be. The why it matters here, this is a big part of an upcoming series that we will have at sightlines.news titled The Future is Flavored, looking at it from this lens of how kind of traditional categories are not trying to fully innovate and change the way somebody may interact with a mayonnaise, for example, but rather pulling a lever like flavor as a way to give more opportunity, more excitement around what has kind of been a traditional, some might say, boring category as well. That this is now a space where the level of quote unquote innovation that we experience and see at Expo West this year is more broad based and making more of a difference for companies maybe than ever before.
Yeah, this is broadly true across packaged food and beverage, that even, sort of these stalwart commodity categories like oatmeal or, mayonnaise, where, the flavor is the thing, right? Mayonnaise tastes like mayonnaise, I guess. No, it doesn't. Increasingly, it does not anymore. Large companies are seeing, let's take peanut butter, yogurt, right? These are things that once had a flavor and now are kind of exploded into a prism of different flavors. And what that does is possibly open new occasions. You could eat a flavored peanut butter as sort of a dessert, maybe, if it's sweetened enough. Maybe this is more of a desserty kind of incorporation. Or, a flavored mayonnaise could become a dipping sauce in the way that a plain one wouldn't. So possibility to open up more occasions, or simply to sell more mayonnaise and peanut butter to the same customers, right? Oh, I pick up my regular Hellmann's and then I pick up a spicy hot Hellmann's, and now that's my new grocery routine. So this isn't relegated to the beverage sphere. This is happening across food CPG, and we're going to dive more into how that works in this upcoming series on Sightlines.
And a big part that we often point to of consumer behavior is the fact that the decisions that people are making in their normal day-to-day habits are going to impact it when they start thinking about specialized categories like alcohol. So to think that, a consumer desire to pick up one of a variety of flavors of mayonnaise may not impact the beer that they drink later that night misses the connection that more than ever, somebody at home can choose the exact kind of flavor that they yearn for. And that then just simply becomes part of their daily routine. So when they pick up, one of the 8 drinks that they have over the course of the day, they're immediately thinking in context of how they make decisions over the course of that entire day, which again is often influenced now more than ever than the ability to find something through the lens of flavor.
And the way that flavor connects with mood. I mean, you wouldn't think mayonnaise has a mood. The mood is plain. It's literally synonymous with kind of boring blandness. However, something like mayo chup, the mayo ketchup hybrid, suddenly this is playful, this is flavored. It has a, it's a dip rather than just a spread. It suddenly has a different kind of feeling about it. And that is something that beverage must understand and must be paying attention to. And there's really great learnings to come from these other categories to help alcohol and beverage kind of stay ahead of how consumers are shopping.
Yeah. People in alcohol often talk about the option and idea of occasions. And so all this is doing, again, we are not talking about brands, innovations that are creating a brand new innovation or some kind of brand new format. Rather, the occasion takes on a wholly new meaning and ability for people. And we're going to have way more about that in a multi-part series in March for Sightlines.news. So if you want to join us and keep tabs of what's coming up and stay ahead of things like these trends, you can learn more over at Sightlines.news. That's going to be it for this episode of The Gist. If you want more of that in-depth analysis and actual insights, join us over at Sightlines.news, where subscribers get weekly updates delivered to their inbox. Until next time, I'm Brian Roth with Kate Burnett.